When my grandparents passed, my mom got the house and she was able to sell it. And I found out about a year later that the money they had gotten from that sale was sitting in another financial institution in a checking account.
Oh, dear.
Earning absolutely nothing. And I was able to show her the difference in what she could earn. And they were giving away thousands of dollars a year. They were just giving up the opportunity to make the money that they already had saved work for them.
Okay, so when it comes to getting a good return on our savings, right, we're looking at the silver lining here of gas prices and all of the things. How do we really choose how to save our money? Like, what's the right place to put it? Because the stock market every day is up and down and through and above and, below. Right. It just is crazy. Even just, today as we sit here, it's gone all over the place.
Oh, exactly. And again, there's so much uncertainty there. So there really is no one-size-fits-all right answer to that. So much will be that it depends answer. Depends on your appetite for risk. Do you just have a few dollars to save and you're going to need those in the short term? Do you have sufficient liquid savings and you just have some excess funds you're looking to have work for you a little bit? Is there a certain long-term project that you're trying to save up for over time? So it really depends on your strategy and the ultimate goal.
Okay. So we've got to define what our goal is what you're telling me.
It helps.
Okay, fair enough.
Probably a good idea.
But tell me a little bit when it comes to savings. Obviously, you mentioned liquidity and our short-term goals. We all know we need to have that savings account for emergency funds.
Absolutely.
Right. But beyond that, we obviously will likely have a 401k, things like that. What are some other things or strategies that we can use to take advantage of these interest rates right now?
Well, the first thing I would say, it might sound a little counterintuitive, but if you're going to focus on your savings, I would say start by looking at your borrowings. Look at your debt. Because again, as interest rates rise and that debt you have is getting more and more expensive to service, it might be worthwhile to look into if you could consolidate or move some of that debt into a lower fixed rate loan, even the same type of loan, just with a different institution, maybe at a different or better rate. Because again, if you're paying on this already, everything else in your budget staying the same, any dollars that you can free up that you're currently using to service your debt, that just becomes money you can save.
Yeah, I love that. I actually heard the story from one of our members recently where they went in thinking that, they just needed a personal loan to help with their daughter who was, graduating and trying to get into a car, right? So she could move on in life. And they ended up being like, well, why would you get a personal loan for this? You have equity in your current vehicle. In fact, let's consolidate this other credit card too. Nice. And they ended up getting a way better interest rate for all of the things, right? So is that what you're saying? Like, let's
exactly
review
what I'm saying.
all.
It's not that you're taking on new debt or putting yourself in any different situation than you're actually already in. It's just a way of reorganizing things such that a lot less of your current income will have to go to interest costs on that debt. And that becomes money that now you can spend as part of your budget or optimally you can save.
Okay, so let's say we have those extra funds, right?
Okay.
We've looked at our debts. Those are, as low as they can be for right now. What are some of those saving opportunities that we have?
Okay. Once again, I would just say it goes back to what is your plan? What's the strategy for these funds that you have? Because if you need them accessible, if you need to be able to get to them frequently or in the near term, you're probably not going to want to maybe look at a certificate account. You'll want to focus on a savings or a money market account because those will be fully liquid. They're able to be withdrawn at any moment. You can get to them as often as you need. If your time horizon's a little longer and you have some time, you can typically get a much higher return by looking at something like a certificate account.
Okay. And what is a certificate account? I think there's a lot of people out there, right? Is it a term deposit? It's a CD? Like, what are all of these things?
Oddly enough, those terms all describe pretty much the same thing. So if you hear certificate of deposit, CD, term deposit, they all describe basically the same thing.
Okay.
Banks and credit unions will have different terms for it, but essentially it's just an account where a certain amount of money is set aside for a certain period of time.
Okay.
And then it earns a stated rate of interest during that time.
Okay. And so because of this environment that we're in, certificate rates are good.
Oh, they are getting better every day as well. As the Fed's increasing rates on the borrowings, certificates are pretty much keeping pace.
Okay. So what would you say is typical? You mentioned a set amount of time for a specific amount of money. Are there like minimums that we have to contribute to these accounts? What is that? sometimes look like? And I'm sure it depends, right? Who you get it through.
It does depend. By and large, there are some basics with certificates. So your standard certificate, just everyday certificate, typically the way that works is there usually is a minimum deposit, let's say $500.
Okay.
Typically there's not a maximum though. So I've seen some fairly large certificates. It's just whatever that comfort level is. And you pick, first of all, a term. So it may be as short as 6 months. It may be as long as 60 months. You may go out 5 years. And essentially, there's a little bit of risk and a little bit of reward on both sides. So you, as the person making the deposit, the risk is, okay, I might lock this up for 5 years. I may need access to this money. And if so, there's a little asterisk to that. You technically can get to the funds if you need to, but there's usually a penalty for doing so. And that's usually a certain number of days worth of the interest that you've earned or might have earned.
Okay.
So it's not like they're completely locked away, never to be touched, but you typically don't want to break those early and incur that penalty. So you have to look at that time horizon, and then you also usually have to have that minimum amount. But other than that, you make that initial deposit, and then it's hands off for the rest of that term. The amount doesn't change other than just the earnings that you're getting on that month to month.
Right.
And then at the end of the term, that matures, and you can either then move that back into a savings type product, or you can just renew and roll that into another term.
Okay. So correct me if I'm wrong. There are some strategies that you can follow to make it maybe that 60-month term not hurt so much, right?
Yeah.
So,
for example, a very popular one is laddering. Some of our members and our listeners may have heard of the concept of laddering, and that's where, let's use an example and say you have $50,000 that you're looking to place. Okay, if you put that out in one 5-year certificate, what happens 2 years from now if all of a sudden you have some kind of emergency? You might need $20,000 of those dollars.
Sure.
You'd have to break that certificate, incur the penalty on the whole $50,000, and then at that point you also lose that interest rate because maybe rates changed in the meantime, and you have to redeploy whatever funds you don't need. So what some people in that situation would do is instead of placing all $50,000 into one certificate, they'd break it up into 5 chunks of $10,000 each. And then they'd open a 12-month, 24, 36, 48, and 60. So basically rungs on a ladder, each one a year apart.
Okay.
And then what will happen is a year from now, that first certificate now matures. If you need it, you can move that into savings and have access to it. If not, you place that out into a new 5-year rung. And then every year, those kind of march down, and every year you'll have one mature that you can either then use or place back out on the 5-year point. But that way you know that you always have some portion of that money coming due within the next year, just in case you need to use it.
Okay. So from your perspective, let's say that, $50,000, not a lot of people are just going to have that on hand to throw into, 5 years laddering worth of certificates.
Exactly.
Is that going to make sense for something as small as $500 each? I mean, rates are good enough, right?
Right. And again, there are even other alternatives to that. So for those that may not have as much to invest, there are some options that can be added to the standard certificate or some variations on it. One of them that we offer at Mountain America is called a growth certificate. Now, it has other names elsewhere. It might be like a flexible certificate, something like that. But the way that works is they usually have a much lower opening balance, as little as $5. So you may have someone that says, I don't even have $500 to open a certificate, but I'm not earning much on my savings and I'd really like to take advantage of these better rates.
Yeah.
Well, you can open a growth certificate for, let's say you have $25 to start with. Great. Open that. You lock in that rate. Let's say you did a 5-year term. So you lock in that rate for the next 5 years. And then as you get your paycheck, as you might have another $10, $15 to deposit, you have the ability to keep adding to the growth certificate.
Okay.
Whereas unlike the standard certificate, you just have that money you deposit that very first day and that's it. You can keep adding to the growth up to a cumulative amount.
That's awesome. So lots of different opportunities and options for us. Can you give me an example of when laddering worked for someone?
Oh, yeah. I'll use my own family as an example.
Awesome.
When my grandparents passed, my mom got the house when they died. And she was able to sell it. And I found out about a year later that the money they had gotten from that sale was sitting in another financial institution in a checking account.
Oh, dear.
Earning absolutely nothing. And so I talked to my parents and I said, Mom, what are we doing here? And she says, well, I might need access to the funds. And I said, okay, that's true. How much of that do you think you might need access to? And so she gave me the amount and I figured out we could essentially divide that into 6 buckets. And I said, okay, that first bucket, let's put into a money market account. It will always be available. You can get to that money anytime. And then we built that 5-year ladder. And so I said, all right, so you'll always have this first bucket, and then you'll always have that second one coming due within a very short time. But that way we can just kind of keep that 5-year ladder going. And I was able to show her the difference in what she could earn. And they were giving away thousands of dollars a year. Again, same institution, same risk, but they were just giving up the opportunity to make the money that they already had saved work for them.
I love that you say they're giving up that money.
Right.
Right? Because really, we can, and this was explained to me when I was in high school, either you're paying interest or you're making interest.
I always heard it, those that understand interest earn it, and that's the thing is, I don't blame anyone for not really understanding how to optimize their earnings because, like my dad, he was a bricklayer growing up, very smart man. But my mom always said, he's a good saver, but he's not necessarily a good investor, so he always knew how to save money and plan ahead and set funds aside. But knowing how to optimize that to really make sure he was maximizing what he could earn, that's a skill that a lot of people, through no fault of their own, they may need some help with. And that's where we at Mountain America, we have people that do understand this and would be very happy to walk you through any of it. Yeah.
So for all of us that can't sit down with Chad Curtis and have you review our checking account balances, right? Like your mom.
Right.
There are other people we can all come meet with.
Oh, absolutely. Our branch employees, our wealth advisors, our service center, we have people that are very skilled in all of this.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Chad, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure as always. Thank you.
Yeah. And thanks to all of you for joining as well. And we will see you on the next episode of Guiding You Forward.